Now that we've created the first quadrant, we want to reflect these values to the other three quadrants of the unit circle. Right here, first quadrant. Up here we've got our second quadrant. Down here is our third quadrant, and then our lower right is our fourth quadrant. So when we look at our x and y values when we're in the second quadrant, y values are positive and x values are negative. And I can just choose any ordered pair that would be in the second quadrant, say -2 and +1. That would appear in the second quadrant where x is the -2 and then y is +1. So y is positive and x is negative. If I go down to the third quadrant, I'm going to have neither the x and y's positive, but both x and y's are negative. And then in the fourth quadrant, the x's are positive and then the y's are negative. So the way I generate the rest of this unit circle is I reflect these angles and these ordered pairs over to the specific quadrants, but I've got to make sure my x's and y's are positive or negative where needed. So right here, since I'm in the second quadrant, all my y's are going to be positive, the x's are going to be negative. So I'm going to take my first ordered pair here and I'm going to reflect it over here, which means this ordered pair is going to be square root of 3/2 and 1/2. And the x value is going to be the one that's negative. Same thing with my second ordered pair. I'm going to reflect this guy over, which is going to be square root of 2/2. And the x is going to be negative. And then finally, we'll reflect the top one here, 1/2 and square root of 3/2. And the x's will be negative. Do the same thing from the first quadrant down to the fourth quadrant, and then the second quadrant down to the third quadrant, making sure we have the right pieces, negative and positive. So here in the fourth quadrant, my x will be positive, my y will be negative. So I'll take my first ordered pair and reflect it down to the first ordered pair down here, which is square root of 3/2 and 1/2. But here the y value is going to be negative. Take my second ordered pair, reflect it down to this spot, the second ordered pair down here. Once again, the y is going to be negative. And then finally, I'll take my first ordered pair here and reflect it down to this piece, where once again the y will be negative. And then finally, with the third quadrant, I can either reflect horizontally or I can reflect vertically from the second quadrant. And with the third quadrant, everything is negative. So square root of 3/2 and 1/2, where both of these are going to be negative. Square root of 2/2 for both of them, where they're both negative. And then finally, 1/2 square root of 3/2, where both of them are negative. The last piece then we need to fill out here in terms of our blanks are the angle measurements. And with these, we've got to do some geometry. We can see here that in my first quadrant, I've got a 30-degree angle, and I know this whole line right here is 180 degrees, which means if I go backwards, this angle has to be 30 degrees. This angle right here and this angle are congruent, which means that this angle measurement is 150 degrees. Since everything is measured from the x-axis as our initial point, I start around here, 30, 45, 60, 90, and then I continue around, which is 180 minus 30, which gives me 150. Same thought process going with the rest of the angle measurements. This is a 45-degree angle, which means I have to go 80 minus 45 to get 135 degrees. And then the last piece right here, this guy is 60 degrees, so I've got to go 180 minus 60, which is going to be 120 degrees. Or I can see that this is 30 degrees away from 90, which means this has to be 30 degrees over. And we'll use the exact same thought process for the rest of them. Since my first angle here was 30 degrees, that means this angle measurement here has to be 30 degrees. So 180 plus 30 is going to be 210. And this time we're adding because we're going beyond 180. The next one we add the 45, so 180 plus 45 is 225. And then 180 plus 60 is going to be 240. And then doing the same thing for the fourth quadrant, 300, 315, and 330. And if we get all the way back to 0, we have 360 degrees. The last set of blanks that we have there then are all the radian measurements, and we can convert our degrees to radians, or we can see the pattern that's going to emerge. That right here, if this is pi over 6, that means this has to be pi, which is 6 pi over 6, minus a pi is 5 pi over 6. Here we had pi over 4. Since this is pi, it's the same thing as 4 pi over 4, and we subtract 1 pi, which is 3 pi over 4. The final piece here, this is pi over 3. So we know this pi here is 3 pi over 3, which is the same thing as pi, and we subtract 1, which gives us 2 pi over 3. Same thing then occurs in the third quadrant, where you add one more pi value. So you get 7 pi over 6, 5 pi over 4, and 4 pi over 3. Once again, this is because pi is 6 pi over 6, plus an additional pi over 6 is 7 pi over 6. This guy is 4 pi over 4, which an additional pi over 4 is 5 pi over 4. And then once again, pi is the same thing as 3 pi over 3, which we add one more pi is 4 pi over 3. And then finally, we do the last thing in the fourth quadrant. Exact same thought process, where we add a pi over 6 or subtract a pi over 6 from each of our different values. So 5 pi over 3, 7 pi over 4, 11 pi over 6, and then finally 360 degrees is the same thing as 2 pi.